My name is Bianca, 32 years old, and I have always been the forgotten middle child in my wealthy Boston family. While my older brother excelled in medicine and my younger sister dazzled with beauty, I learned to disappear in the shadows they cast. Ironically, that invisibility helped me build a successful life away from them. Now, after years of silence, a family crisis has them suddenly desperate for my help. The decision I make next will change everything. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey of family drama and self-discovery. I grew up in the prestigious Preston family known throughout New England's social circles for their wealth and connections. Our sprawling colonial home in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood was the envy of many with its perfect landscaping and magazine-worthy interior. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. My father, William Preston, was a titan in the investment banking world. His imposing 6'3" frame and perpetually serious expression matched his reputation as a ruthless businessman. At home, he brought the same intensity, expecting nothing less than excellence from his children. He wore tailored suits even on weekends and measured success in achievements and accolades rather than happiness. My mother, Eleanor, was a former Massachusetts beauty queen who transitioned seamlessly into the role of social climbing wife. With her perfectly highlighted blonde hair and surgical enhancements that kept her looking 20 years younger, she orchestrated our family image with the precision of a military general. Every family photo, holiday gathering, and social appearance was calculated to maintain the Preston reputation. Then there was my older brother, James. 4 years my senior, he was the golden child, the one destined for greatness from birth. His perfect grades, athletic prowess, and charm made him my father's pride and joy. When James announced his intention to become a doctor, my father practically burst with pride. No expense was spared for his education, extracurriculars, or anything that would help him on his predetermined path to medical greatness. My younger sister, Sophia, completed our family picture. 2 years younger than me, she inherited my mother's beauty and social grace. With her natural blonde curls and striking blue eyes, she became the family princess. Her room was filled with pageant crowns by the time she was 12, and my mother spent countless hours grooming her for the social spotlight. And then, there was me caught in the middle. Neither the brilliant firstborn nor the beautiful baby. Just Bianca. Average height, average brown hair, average grades. At least, that is how my family saw me. I realized I was forgettable around age 7 during my second grade piano recital. I had practiced for weeks, excited to play my piece, Beethoven's Für Elise. When the day arrived, I scanned the audience repeatedly as the other students performed. The familiar faces of their proud parents beamed from the front rows. But the seats I had saved remained empty. After my performance, which earned appreciative applause from strangers, I waited outside until the janitor asked if someone was coming for me. I called home from the school office. "Oh, Bianca." My mother sounded surprised. "Today was your recital. I could have sworn that was next week. James has his science fair presentation tonight, and your father and I are here with Sophia. Can you get a ride with another family?" That became the pattern. My accomplishments were forgotten. My events missed, my needs overlooked. For my 9th birthday, they scheduled a business trip, leaving me with our housekeeper. When I won the school spelling bee in 6th grade, no one came to watch. My report cards received cursory glances while James's were framed, and Sophia's participation ribbons were celebrated like Olympic medals. I tried everything to gain their attention. I joined clubs, maintained honor roll, even attempted sports, though I lacked natural athletic ability. Nothing seemed to register. At dinner, my stories went unheard, as my father questioned James about medical terms, and my mother advised Sophia on skincare routines. By 14, I stopped trying to compete. Instead, I developed a quiet resilience and independent spirit. Our family library became my sanctuary, where I discovered photography books that sparked my interest. I saved my allowance for months to buy my first camera, a used Canon that the previous owner had upgraded from. No one noticed when I started carrying it everywhere, capturing images of life others overlooked: morning dew on garden leaves, the weathered hands of our groundskeeper, shadows stretching across our marble foyer. Photography gave me eyes to see beauty in the forgotten corners of life. Perhaps being overlooked had given me this gift, this ability to notice what others missed. During family gatherings, I became the observer, the chronicler, finding solace behind my lens while the spotlight shone elsewhere. At 15, my art teacher, Ms. Jackson, noticed my growing portfolio. "You have a remarkable eye, Bianca," she said, the first adult who seemed to truly see me. "You find dignity in the overlooked. That is a rare talent." Her words watered a seed of self-worth that had nearly withered away in the shadow of my siblings. Perhaps being forgotten was painful, but it had shaped my vision in ways I was only beginning to understand. As I entered my teenage years, I realized my family had typecast us all: James the brilliant, Sophia the beautiful, and me the invisible. The roles were set, and no amount of achievement could change the script. So instead of fighting for a different role in their story, I began writing my own. High school brought no changes to my family's pattern of neglect. If anything, as James prepared for college and Sophia blossomed into a stunning teenager, the attention gap widened further. I became so accustomed to being overlooked that I stopped expecting anything different. My 16th birthday fell on a Thursday. I came downstairs that morning to find no cards, no acknowledgments, not even a hurried "happy birthday," as everyone rushed through their morning routines. My father was on a conference call, my mother was organizing a charity luncheon, James was studying for a biology exam, and Sophia was frantically trying on outfits for a school dance. I stood in our kitchen, watching this familiar choreography of family life that somehow always danced around me. "It is my birthday today," I finally said, my voice sounding foreign even to my own ears. 4 pairs of eyes briefly glanced my way with varying degrees of surprise and guilt. "Of course it is, dear," my mother said, checking her watch. "We will do something this weekend. Your father has an important dinner tonight with investors." It was not that they were cruel. They simply forgot I existed unless directly reminded, like a piece of furniture that blends so completely into a room's background that you stop seeing it entirely. That afternoon, I wandered downtown with my camera and ended up at a small photography gallery. The images on display captured ordinary people in extraordinary moments of vulnerability and strength. The photographer had found poetry in everyday existence, and I stood transfixed before each frame. "You like photography?" The gallery owner, a woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes, approached me. "I love it," I admitted. "It is the only thing that makes sense to me sometimes." She smiled and introduced herself as Diana Reed, a former photojournalist who now ran the gallery and taught classes at the local community college. When I shyly showed her some photos on my camera, her eyes widened. "You have a natural talent for composition," she said. "Have you ever considered pursuing this seriously?" That conversation changed everything. Diana became my mentor, offering weekend workshops that I attended religiously. Under her guidance, my technical skills improved, but more importantly, she helped me understand the power of visual storytelling. Meanwhile, at home, my growing passion went largely unnoticed. When I won a regional youth photography contest that spring, I brought the news, and my winning photograph, a stark black and white image of an elderly man feeding pigeons, his weathered face caught in a moment of simple joy, to dinner. "I have an announcement," I said during a rare moment of conversational pause. "My photograph won first place in the New England Youth Vision Contest. It will be displayed at the Boston Arts Center next month." "That is nice, dear," my mother said distantly before immediately turning to James. "Tell us more about your medical school applications. Have you heard from Harvard yet?" The conversation swiftly moved to James's promising future, my achievement evaporating like morning mist in strong sunlight. I caught my father glancing at my winning photograph with a slight frown, as though trying to understand its value. "Photography is a fine hobby," he said later that evening when I attempted to share Diana's suggestion about summer photography programs. "But it is not a real career path. Perhaps something in business would be more suitable as you think about college." The dismissal stung, but by then I had grown a thicker skin. I continued my photography in stolen moments, creating a portfolio that Diana helped me strengthen for art school applications, a plan I kept to myself. The full extent of my invisibility became painfully clear at Sophia's sweet 16 party. My parents spared no expense transforming our home into a fairy tale scene, with professional decorations, catering, and a live band. The guest list included over 200 people from schoolmates to family friends and business associates. During the event, I took candid photographs capturing moments that the professional photographer missed. Sophia's genuine surprise when her crush arrived, my mother's rare moment of unguarded pride. Even my father relaxing his perpetual stern expression to dance with my sister. As I circulated through the crowd camera in hand, an elderly great-aunt squinted at me and asked, "Now, which Preston are you? Not the doctor one, surely you are too young." "I am Bianca, the middle child," I explained, used to this confusion. "Oh," she exclaimed with embarrassment. "I did not realize William and Eleanor had 3 children. How lovely." Later, as guests gathered for family photographs, my mother waved me over impatiently. "Bianca, put the camera down and join us." I handed my camera to a nearby guest and moved to stand beside my brother. "No, dear," my mother said, rearranging us. "James and Sophia should be together in the center with your father and me. You stand at the edge." In the resulting photographs, I appeared as an afterthought, partially cut off in some shots. When the professional album arrived weeks later, I noticed that in several of the main family portraits I had been cropped out entirely. My sanctuary during these years became the high school darkroom where I spent lunches and free periods developing film. The art teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, recognized my dedication and gave me a key allowing access even after school hours. Her classroom became the one place I felt seen and valued. "Your work speaks to isolation in a profound way," she told me, reviewing my portfolio. "There is beauty in how you capture loneliness." I had never consciously realized that was what I had been photographing, all the subjects who existed on society's periphery, overlooked spaces, forgotten moments. I had been documenting my own emotional reality through my lens. In my junior year, I met Marcus in advanced art class. Tall and thoughtful with dark-rimmed glasses, he was the first person who seemed genuinely interested in my perspective. We spent afternoons discussing art and philosophy while walking through Boston neighborhoods, my camera capturing the city's hidden stories. "You see things others miss," he told me once as we sat on a park bench reviewing my day's photographs. "It is like you have access to this whole other layer of the world." Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect rather than passion. He was the first person who made me feel that being quiet and observant was a strength rather than a deficiency. Through his eyes, I began to see my invisibility as a unique vantage point rather than a punishment. When senior year arrived, my guidance counselor asked about college plans. James had already graduated from Harvard and was thriving in medical school. Sophia, though only a sophomore, was already being scouted by modeling agencies and collecting early admissions brochures. "I want to apply to art schools for photography," I said, showing the counselor my portfolio that Mrs. Abernathy had helped me organize. Her eyebrows raised in surprise. "These are exceptional, Bianca. Have you discussed this with your parents?" I hadn't knowing what their reaction would be, but that evening at dinner, bolstered by Mrs. Abernathy's encouragement and Marcus's support, I finally shared my plans. "Art school." My father's fork paused midway to his mouth. "That is not practical. The Preston name has a reputation in business and medicine not taking pictures." "Photography is an oversaturated field," my mother added. "And most artists struggle their entire lives. We were thinking Georgetown would be perfect for you. Their business program is excellent, and we have connections there. I do not want to study business, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I have already requested application materials from Chicago Institute of Arts and several other photography programs. The silence that followed was heavy with disapproval. James glanced at me with something between pity and surprise, unused to seeing me stand my ground. Sophia seemed simply confused that I would choose a path so different from the Preston expectations. This is just a phase, my father finally said. A hobby is fine, but art school is out of the question. No daughter of mine will waste her potential and our money on something so frivolous. That night, I made 2 decisions. I would apply to art schools anyway, and I would find a way to pay for it myself. Mrs. Abernathy helped me apply for scholarships. Diana wrote a glowing recommendation. I picked up photography jobs shooting local events to save every dollar I could. When my acceptance letter from Chicago arrived, along with a partial scholarship, the path forward became clear. I would need to break away completely to have any chance of becoming my own person. The final confrontation with my parents was painful but necessary. I am going to Chicago, I told them, letter in hand, with or without your blessing. My father's face hardened. If you choose this path, do not expect our financial support. Photography is just a hobby, Bianca. It is time to grow up and face reality. My mother looked genuinely perplexed. Why would you want to leave Boston? Everything you need is here. But that was exactly the problem. Nothing I needed had ever been here. Not recognition, not support, not understanding. What awaited me in Chicago was the chance to finally be seen, to be known for my own merits, rather than as an afterthought in the Preston family narrative. 3 months later, I packed 2 suitcases and my camera equipment, said goodbye to Marcus, who was headed to NYU, hugged Mrs. Abernathy and Diana, and boarded a flight to Chicago. My parents offered a perfunctory farewell, still convinced I would give up and return when reality set in. James was too busy with medical residency interviews to see me off. Sophia gave me a confused hug, as though she could not quite understand why anyone would willingly leave the golden circle of Preston privilege. As the plane took off, I pressed my forehead against the window and watched Boston shrink beneath me. For the first time, being forgotten felt like freedom. Arriving in Chicago with 2 suitcases and a camera bag, I stepped into a city that had no preconceptions about who I should be. The anonymity was both terrifying and exhilarating. My parents had made good on their threat to withhold financial support, leaving me with my savings, partial scholarship, and a determination that surprised even me. My first apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a building with temperamental plumbing and neighbors whose lives played out loudly through thin walls. It was nothing like the pristine silence of our Beacon Hill mansion, but it was mine. I found a roommate through a school bulletin board, a music student named Grace with bright red hair and an infectious laugh. Fair warning, she said when I moved in. I practice cello at ungodly hours, but I also make killer pancakes as an apology. Unlike my family, Grace asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She wanted to know about my photography, my background, my dreams. When I hesitantly shared stories of growing up as the forgotten Preston, she seemed genuinely outraged on my behalf. That is messed up, she declared, but their loss is Chicago's gain. The first semester at art school challenged everything I thought I knew about photography. My professors pushed me beyond technical proficiency to find my authentic voice. One assignment required photographing strangers and learning their stories, forcing me out of my comfort zone of silent observation. Your technical skills are excellent, my portfolio professor noted, but your images feel distant. Get closer, not just physically, but emotionally. Take risks. Financial reality hit hard that first winter. My scholarship covered tuition, but little else. I worked evenings at a coffee shop near campus, picked up weekend gigs photographing family portraits and small events, and ate more ramen than I care to remember. When my ancient laptop died mid-project, I spent 3 sleepless nights in the school's computer lab to finish my assignment. I called home exactly twice that first year. Both conversations followed the same pattern: brief inquiries about my well-being, followed by lengthy updates about James's residency successes or Sophia's modeling prospects. Neither time did my parents ask to see my work or express interest in visiting. Their indifference, once painful, now felt like confirmation that I had made the right choice in leaving. My breakthrough came unexpectedly during my sophomore year. A photography internship opened at a small but respected cultural magazine. The competition was fierce, with dozens of applicants from various schools. The assignment: submit a series exploring an original theme. I submitted Overlooked, a collection of images capturing moments, people, and places that existed in the periphery of attention. A janitor singing to himself while mopping an empty hallway at dawn. An elderly woman arranging a single flower in her apartment window. The back alleys of Chicago's glittering downtown, where service workers took their breaks. When the magazine's photo editor called to offer me the internship, her words validated everything I had been working toward. You have an extraordinary ability to find dignity in what others fail to notice. That is a rare and valuable perspective. The internship connected me to Chicago's art community and led to my first gallery showing, a small affair in a cafe near campus, but a significant milestone nonetheless. Standing before my framed photographs on opening night, surrounded by classmates, professors, and strangers who had come to see my work, I experienced a sense of visibility I had never known in my family home. Grace brought a group of friends who toasted me with cheap champagne. My portfolio professor brought a curator from a larger gallery who expressed interest in my developing style. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, appreciated for exactly who I was. Back in Boston, my family's lives continued on their predetermined trajectories. James completed his residency and joined a prestigious medical practice. Sophia signed with a modeling agency and began appearing in regional advertising campaigns. Through holiday cards and occasional phone calls, I received the highlight reel of Preston's successes, never once including questions about my own progress. During my third year, I received an invitation to Sophia's wedding, to the son of one of my father's business associates. The embossed envelope addressed to Ms. Bianca Preston and guest felt like an afterthought, probably added to the list by a wedding planner rather than my sister. I attended alone, flying back to Boston for the weekend. The ceremony was exactly what one would expect from a Preston event: lavish, photogenic, and meticulously planned for maximum social impact. I brought my camera, but kept it tucked away, knowing my role was to blend into the background, not document from the sidelines. At the reception, relatives and family friends squinted at my name tag with vague recognition. "Preston, are you from William's side or Eleanor's?" they would ask, not connecting me to the bride at all. "I am their daughter," I would explain. "Sophia's sister." Oh, the inevitable surprise. I did not realize they had another daughter. My mother had seated me at a table with distant cousins rather than at the family table, an arrangement that spoke volumes. When I approached her during the reception, she air-kissed my cheeks and gave me a quick once-over. "You look thin, Bianca. Is that what they are wearing in Chicago these days?" she asked, eyeing my simple black dress with mild disapproval. "You should have told me you needed something for the wedding. I could have had my stylist find something more appropriate." Before I could respond, she was pulled away by the wedding planner, leaving me standing alone with a half-empty champagne glass. Later, during family photographs, I was positioned at the edge, once again, an awkward addition to the perfect family portrait. It was my father's comment during the father-daughter dance that finalized my decision to fully cut ties. Standing beside him at the bar, I attempted small talk about the beautiful venue. "Your sister knows how to make us proud," he said, watching Sophia twirl in her designer gown. "She has always understood what it means to be a Preston." He glanced at me, taking in my simple appearance, and added, "It is not too late for you to come home and rejoin the family business. Photography was a nice creative outlet during college, but it is time to think about a real career." In that moment, I realized nothing had changed. I would always be the unfinished project, the daughter who needed correction rather than acceptance. My accomplishments would never be valid in their eyes because they failed to fit the Preston definition of success. The next morning, before my flight back to Chicago, I left a note at the hotel desk for my parents. It was brief, explaining that I would be taking a step back from family obligations to focus on my career, and that I wished them well. I did not say goodbye to anyone else slipping away from the post-wedding brunch unnoticed, fitting for the forgotten daughter. On the plane back to Chicago, a strange lightness filled me. Cutting those final threads of expectation felt like setting down a heavy burden I had carried my entire life. Chicago was home now. My work, my friends, my chosen path, these had become my foundation. The family I had created for myself awaited me. Grace, with her cello and pancakes, professors who challenged and believed in me, colleagues who respected my eye and voice. Together, they had done what the Prestons never could. They had seen me, truly seen me, and found me worthy of attention. The 5 years following my sister's wedding passed in a blur of hard work, creative growth, and slowly building success. I threw myself into photography with an intensity that sometimes surprised even me. Each shoot, each show, each publication felt like a vindication of my choice to leave Boston behind. My specialty became finding and documenting what others overlooked, moments of unexpected beauty, dignity in ordinary lives, stories told in the margins of society. My signature style developed intimate without being intrusive, respectful of subjects often ignored by mainstream media, finding light in overlooked corners. I named my business Overlooked Moments Photography, a nod to my past that had shaped my artistic vision. What began as freelance work for small publications grew into regular commissions from major magazines, corporate clients seeking authentic content, and eventually more prestigious gallery showings. At 28, I achieved what many photographers only dream of: a feature spread in National Geographic showcasing my series on urban food deserts and the communities creating solutions. Seeing my name in that iconic yellow border felt surreal. I bought multiple copies, sending one to Mrs. Abernathy and another to Diana, the mentors who had believed in me before I fully believed in myself. I did not send one to my parents. Our communication had dwindled to annual Christmas cards and occasionally relayed messages through James, who maintained minimal contact. From these sparse updates, I learned that my father had expanded the family business, my mother had become president of her charity foundation, and Sophia was expecting her first child. None of these updates included questions about my life or work. It was as if the Prestons had adjusted their family narrative to function perfectly well without their middle child, perhaps even better, without the complication of my divergent path. With the success of the National Geographic feature and several high-profile commercial projects, I was finally able to buy my first home, a sun-filled loft in an old factory building with enough space for both living and a proper studio. The day I signed the papers, Grace, who had remained my closest friend and now played cello for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, brought champagne. "To the girl who arrived with 2 suitcases and now owns real estate," she toasted. "You built this life brick by brick, Bianca. No one handed you anything." The loft became more than just my home. It became a gathering place for the family I had chosen. Sunday dinners with friends, critique sessions with fellow photographers, mentoring meetings with art students I volunteered to guide all filled the space with the warmth and connection I had never found in the Preston mansion. My professional recognition continued to grow. A photography association named me Emerging Visionary of the Year. A prestigious gallery in Manhattan featured my work in a group show of up-and-coming photographers. The Chicago Tribune profiled me and my business in their arts section. The irony was not lost on me. My ability to notice the overlooked, honed by years of being forgotten within my own family, had become my greatest professional strength. The very quality that had made me invisible at home had made me successful in the world. I channeled this insight into a passion project, a mentorship program for teenage photographers from underprivileged backgrounds. Working with these young people, many of whom felt unseen in their own lives, I found a way to transform my painful past into something healing and productive. You taught me to use my camera to make people see what they were missing, one student told me at the end of a year showcase. Now my neighborhood does not look forgotten to me anymore. It looks important. Her words resonated deeply. Through my lens, and now through theirs, the overlooked became impossible to ignore. My personal life had taken longer to develop than my career. Dating in my early 20s had been sporadic and unfulfilling, often disrupted by my intense work schedule and lingering trust issues from my family experience. I gravitated toward emotionally unavailable men, unconsciously replicating the dynamic I had grown up with. Grace Everdirect pointed this out during one post-breakup ice cream session. "You keep choosing guys who make you work for basic attention," she observed. "You are recreating your family pattern." Her insight sparked a period of therapy where I began unpacking the effects of growing up as the forgotten child. Slowly, I learned to recognize my value did not depend on others' validation, and that invisibility was not my natural state. This work prepared me to recognize something different when David entered my life. We met at a charity auction where he bid on one of my photographs. A landscape architect with kind eyes and an easy laugh, he approached me afterwards to discuss the image, a black and white study of an abandoned community garden being reclaimed by neighborhood children. "You captured something I try to create in my work," he said. "That moment when neglected space becomes meaningful again." Our connection was immediate, based on mutual respect and shared creative values. Unlike previous relationships with David, I never felt I needed to perform or prove my worth. He listened when I spoke, remembered details about my work, and showed up consistently without prompting. When I eventually shared stories about my family, he responded with understanding rather than pity. "They missed knowing an extraordinary person," he said simply. "That is their loss, not a reflection of your value." After 2 years together, David moved into the loft, bringing his architectural drawings collection of rare plants and steady grounding presence. Together, we created a home that felt nothing like the cold perfection of the Preston mansion, but instead reflected our creative, sometimes messy, authentic lives. Despite my growing peace with the past, occasional moments still triggered old wounds. Scrolling through social media one evening, I came across photos from my parents' 40th anniversary celebration, an elaborate affair, at the Boston Harbor Hotel. The images showed James with his wife Sophia, with her husband and toddler, my parents, beaming at the center. The Preston family complete and perfect without me. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the ghost of that forgotten child still living somewhere inside me. David found me staring at the screen, tears streaming silently down my face. "They didn't even tell me about it," I whispered. He sat beside me, not offering platitudes or solutions, just presence. "Would you have wanted to go?" he asked gently. The question made me pause. Would I have wanted to return to that space of invisibility, to stand at the edges of a family that had never seen me clearly? The answer surprised me with its clarity. No, I realized. I wouldn't. That night marked another step in my healing. The pain was real, but it no longer defined me. I had built a life where I was seen and valued. The little girl, desperate for her parents' attention, had grown into a woman who no longer needed their validation to know her worth. As my 30th birthday approached, I decided to celebrate with a solo exhibition, my most personal work yet, The Art of Being Forgotten, a series exploring how being overlooked shapes perception and identity. The collection included subtle references to my own story, though not explicitly autobiographical. The opening night exceeded all expectations, with art critics, collectors, and friends filling the gallery. Standing amid the crowd hearing conversations about my vision and technique, I felt a completion of some long journey. The forgotten child had found her voice, and people were listening. I was discussing one of the central pieces with a collector when my phone began vibrating repeatedly in my pocket. Multiple missed calls from a number I rarely saw. James. A text followed. Call immediately. Dad in hospital. Heart attack. The Preston family crisis had found me at the height of my success, and now they wanted me home. The late-night call from James shattered the careful boundaries I had built between my new life and my past. His voice, normally confident and controlled, trembled slightly as he explained the situation. Dad collapsed during a business meeting. Triple bypass surgery tomorrow morning. It is serious, Bianca. I stood in the quiet corner of the gallery where I had retreated to take the call, the sounds of my successful exhibition continuing in the background. My first instinct was concern for my father, despite our strained relationship. My second was wariness about being pulled back into the Preston family dynamics. I am sorry to hear that, James. I hope the surgery goes well, I said, maintaining emotional distance. You need to come home, he said, an edge entering his voice. This is not just about Dad's health. There is more going on. When I did not immediately agree, his composure cracked further. The business is in trouble, serious trouble. Dad has been making risky investments leveraging assets. With him incapacitated, we are facing potential collapse. This revelation surprised me. Preston Investments had always been portrayed as unshakable, the cornerstone of our family's identity and wealth. The thought of it faltering seemed impossible. I am not sure how I could help with that, I said carefully. I have no experience in finance. James's laugh held no humor. The irony is not lost on me, but we need your business acumen more than my medical knowledge right now. Your photography business, you built it from nothing, right? Made it profitable. That is more than any of us have done. We were handed everything. His admission stunned me into silence. James, the golden child, was acknowledging my success and confessing to his own limitations in the same breath. Mom and Sophia don't fully understand how bad things are, he continued. Dad protected them from the business realities, but we need to make decisions quickly, and I cannot do this alone. Why now? I asked the question that had been forming since his first words. Why reach out to me after all these years of silence? The pause that followed told me everything. Because we have no other options, he finally admitted. And because despite everything, you are a Preston. After ending the call with a non-committal promise to think about it, I returned to my exhibition in a daze. David found me staring blankly at one of my own photographs, a study of empty chairs around a family dinner table. Bad news, he asked, instantly reading my expression. As we drove home later that night, I explained the situation, my conflicted feelings pouring out. They ignored me for years, dismissed my choices, forgot my existence until they needed something. And now I am supposed to drop everything and rush to their rescue. David kept his eyes on the road. What do you want to do? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore the call, just as they ignored me. But another part is concerned, he finished. Because despite everything, they are your family. Back at the loft, I paced restlessly while David made tea. The practical considerations were clear. I had commitments to clients, the mentorship program was mid-session, and returning to Boston meant stepping back into a role I had fought to escape. They will expect me to be the same Bianca who left, I said. The one who could be overlooked and forgotten. The one who did not matter. But you are not that person anymore, David reminded me. You haven't been for a long time. I called Grace next morning, needing my oldest friend's perspective. Her response was characteristically blunt. "They abandoned you, and now they want your help. Tell them to hire a consultant." When I did not immediately agree, she sighed. "You are considering it, aren't you? After everything they put you through?" "I keep thinking about what I would regret more," I explained. "Going back and dealing with their dismissal again, or not going, and always wondering if I could have made a difference. Not for them, but for me. To prove to myself that I can face them as an equal now." "Just promise me you will set boundaries," Grace said. "Do not let them make you invisible again." After another sleepless night, I made my decision. I would go to Boston, but on my terms. I would not stay in the family home, but at a hotel. I would give them 2 weeks of my time to assess the business situation, then return to Chicago regardless of resolution. And I would not hide my success or apologize for the life I had built. David supported my choice, but voiced his concern. "I worry they will hurt you again." "They probably will," I acknowledged. "But this time, I am going in with open eyes and a return ticket." I spent the day rearranging shoots, setting up remote work protocols for ongoing projects, and briefing my assistant on handling the gallery exhibit's closing. By evening, I had booked a flight to Boston for the following morning. As I packed a suitcase so different from the desperate departure 8 years earlier, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The frightened, invisible girl was gone. In her place stood a confident woman who had built her own success story. Whether the Prestons could see that person remained to be seen. The flight to Boston gave me time to prepare mentally. I reviewed what James had shared about the business situation, researched similar family business crises, and steeled myself for the emotional gauntlet ahead. Landing at Logan Airport. I felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if I were simultaneously my younger self fleeing and my current self returning, victorious. I took a taxi directly to Massachusetts General Hospital, rather than stopping at the hotel. The familiar Boston streets passed by the window unchanged, yet completely different through my eyes now. The city no longer felt like a cage, but merely a place one that held my past, but did not define my present. At the hospital, I found James in the cardiac care waiting room, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his expensive shirt was wrinkled as if he had slept in it. "You came," he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "I said I would think about it. I thought about it. Here I am." He nodded, then briefed me on our father's condition. The surgery had gone as well as could be expected. William Preston was stable, but would face a lengthy recovery and significant lifestyle changes. The business, however, remained in critical condition. "Dad made a series of high-risk investments last year," James explained, lowering his voice, though we were alone in the waiting room. "The market turned against him. He leveraged family assets, including the house, to cover margins. We are overextended and facing calls from creditors who sense weakness. And he kept this from everyone. Pride," James said simply. The great William Preston could not admit he had miscalculated. He kept hoping for a turnaround that never came. The situation was worse than I had imagined. Not just a temporary crisis, but potential financial collapse for a family whose identity was built entirely on wealth and status. No wonder they had finally remembered their forgotten daughter. "Mom and Sophia are with him now," James said. "They still do not understand the full picture." "I thought we could talk to them together." Together? As if we were a united front, a team. The irony was not lost on me. "I want to see him first," I decided. "Alone." James looked ready to object, then nodded, giving me the room number. As I walked the antiseptic corridors toward my father's room, I wondered what version of Bianca Preston I would be when I crossed that threshold, the forgotten middle child seeking approval, or the successful businesswoman offering conditional help. The answer, I realized, as I paused outside his door, was neither. I would simply be myself, complete with accomplishments and scars, strength and vulnerability. The person I had become, with or without their recognition. I took a deep breath and entered the room ready to face whatever version of family awaited me. Walking into my father's hospital room felt like stepping back in time while simultaneously asserting my present self. The rhythmic beeping of monitors created a sterile soundtrack as I took in the scene. My father, the imposing William Preston, now diminished in a hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that tracked his compromised heart. My mother sat rigidly in a visitor's chair, her perfectly highlighted hair and designer outfit incongruous in the clinical setting. Sophia stood by the window, absently scrolling through her phone, her model's posture maintaining elegance even in crisis. None of them noticed me immediately, a fitting echo of my childhood. I cleared my throat, and 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me with varying degrees of surprise. "Bianca," my mother said, her tone suggesting she was not entirely certain I would actually appear despite James's assurances. "You look different." 8 years had indeed changed me. My once long hair was now cut in a confident bob that framed my face. My wardrobe had evolved from the neutral tones designed to blend into a more distinctive style that expressed my artistic sensibility. But the real difference was in my carriage, the way I held myself, with the quiet assurance of someone who knew her own worth. "Hello, Mother," I replied, then nodded to Sophia before approaching my father's bed. "Dad?" His eyes, clouded with medication but still sharp with intelligence, assessed me with surprise. "You came back," he said, his voice weaker than the commanding tone I remembered. "For a visit," I clarified. "James told me about your health situation and the business concerns." My mother's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "James should not have bothered you with business matters at a time like this. Family concerns are for family." The implication was clear. Despite sharing their DNA, my years of absence had removed me from their definition of family. "I run a successful business of my own," I said evenly. "James thought my experience might be helpful." Sophia looked up from her phone, suddenly interested. "Your photography thing, is that actually making money?" The dismissive tone was so familiar it almost made me smile. Some things hadn't changed at all. "Yes, my photography thing is quite profitable," I replied. "I own a loft in Chicago, have clients including National Geographic and Vogue, and employ 3 people. My father's expression shifted slightly, a new calculation occurring behind his eyes. "National Geographic," I nodded. "Cover story last year on urban renewal. I specialize in finding beauty and dignity in overlooked places and people." The irony of my specialization was not lost on any of us, though none acknowledged it directly. "Well," my mother said with forced brightness, "that's lovely that your hobby has worked out, but we should focus on your father's recovery now. The business matters can wait." "Actually, Eleanor," my father said, his voice strengthening slightly, "the business cannot wait. And if Bianca has built something successful from nothing, perhaps we should listen to what she has to say." The admission visibly cost him his pride, warring with practicality. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness at his belated recognition of my capabilities, offered only when he needed something from me. James entered then, having given me time alone with the family. The tension in his shoulders suggested he had been bracing for some kind of explosion. Finding us in a strained but civil conversation seemed to surprise him. "I've booked a conference room down the hall," he said. "The doctors want Dad to rest, and we need to discuss the business situation privately." My mother looked ready to object, but my father nodded weakly. "Go with James and Bianca," he told her. "Sophia, too. It's time everyone understood where we stand." The conference room felt appropriately corporate for the discussion ahead, a neutral territory where family dynamics might be temporarily superseded by business concerns. As we settled around the table, I noted how automatically we assumed our old positions, James at the head, taking the leadership role in our father's absence. My mother and Sophia to his right automatically allied. and me still separate on the opposite side. "I'll be direct," James began once the door closed behind us. "Dad's investments have put us in a precarious position. The company has leveraged assets we cannot afford to lose, including the house. Without immediate intervention, we're facing bankruptcy within months." My mother's hand flew to her throat. "That's impossible. William would never risk our home." "He did," James said flatly. "Along with the vacation properties in Nantucket and Vermont, and the investment portfolio that generates your foundation's funding." Sophia's perfectly composed face showed genuine shock for the first time. "What about my trust fund?" James's grimace answered before his words did. "Tied up in the same investments. If the company goes under, the trusts are vulnerable to creditors." The reality of their situation sank in slowly. The Preston family fortune, assumed to be as solid and permanent as the brick and stone of their Beacon Hill mansion, was revealed as the illusion it had become. "What do we do?" my mother asked, her voice small and uncertain, a tone I had never heard from the formidable Eleanor Preston. "That's why we asked Bianca to come," James said, looking to me. "We need someone with fresh perspective who understands business fundamentals, but isn't entangled in Dad's financial web." All eyes turned to me, expecting immediate solutions. The irony was almost too perfect. The forgotten daughter, whose choices had been dismissed and devalued, now positioned as the potential savior. "I need to see the books," I said practically. "All of them, not just what Dad showed the family. And I'll need to understand exactly what assets are committed where." "You'll help us then?" Sophia asked, her tone suggesting she had not expected me to agree. I looked at each of them in turn, James exhausted and humbled. My mother frightened behind her perfect makeup. Sophia suddenly uncertain in a way her charmed life had never prepared her for. "I'll assess the situation," I clarified. "I've taken 2 weeks away from my business to do that. After that, I'll make recommendations, but I'm returning to Chicago regardless of where things stand." "2 weeks," my mother repeated incredulously. "But we need you here. This is a family emergency." "I have commitments in Chicago," I explained calmly. "Clients who depend on me, employees who need direction, a business I've built through years of hard work. I won't abandon them even for this." The concept seemed to genuinely baffle her that I would prioritize my own life and responsibilities over the Preston family crisis. In her worldview, nothing could be more important than maintaining the family's position and image. "Where are you staying?" James asked, changing the subject. "The house has plenty of room." "I've booked a hotel," I replied. The thought of sleeping in my old bedroom, surrounded by the relics of the person I had been, felt suffocating. My mother looked offended. "A hotel? When your father is ill, what will people think?" "I'm not concerned with what people think." I said a statement that would have been unimaginable from the Bianca who had left Boston years ago. "The hotel gives me the space I need to work effectively." Before anyone could argue further, I steered the conversation back to practical matters. "I need access to all financial records, investor communications, and asset documentation." "Can you arrange that, James?" He nodded, clearly relieved to focus on concrete steps rather than family tension. We spent the next hour outlining what information I would need and how quickly it could be gathered. Throughout the discussion, I maintained professional distance, treating the situation as I would any business consultation. As we prepared to leave, my mother touched my arm tentatively, an unusual gesture from a woman who rarely initiated physical contact. "Will you come to dinner tomorrow night?" she asked. "At the house. Your father should be released by then, and we could all catch up properly." The invitation surprised me. In the old days, I would have grasped at this inclusion, desperate for any acknowledgement. Now I recognized it for what it was, a combination of genuine desire for family unity in crisis and the practical need to keep me engaged in helping them. "I'll be there," I agreed, setting boundaries even as I accepted. "But I'll need to leave early to review documents at the hotel." That evening, alone in my hotel room, I called David. Hearing his voice centered me immediately, pulling me back to the reality of the life I had built. "How bad is it?" he asked after I had explained the business situation. "Worse than they initially let on," I admitted. "They've been living on borrowed time and money. The Preston Empire is basically a house of cards at this point." "And how are you?" The real question. I sighed, gazing out at the Boston skyline, once so familiar and now seeming like a view from someone else's life. It's strange. They need me now, so suddenly I'm visible, but they still don't really see me, just what I can do for them. "Are you going to help them?" "I'm going to try," I said. "Not for them exactly. Maybe for the little girl I was who never understood why she wasn't enough. To prove something to her." "Just remember who you are now," David said softly. "Don't let them pull you back into old patterns." "I won't," I promised, though even as I said it, I felt the gravitational pull of family roles tugging at me. The next day was spent at Preston investment offices, diving deep into financial records that told a sobering story of risk pride and self-deception. My father had made a series of increasingly desperate investments, trying to maintain the appearance of success, while actual returns diminished. The picture that emerged was of a man so identified with his business success that he could not admit failure, even to himself. By the time I arrived at the Preston mansion for dinner that evening, I had a clearer understanding of just how precarious their situation was. Standing on the doorstep of my childhood home, I took a steadying breath before ringing the bell, a small act of assertion, treating myself as a visitor, rather than simply using my old key. The housekeeper who answered was not the one from my childhood, but her surprised expression when I introduced myself suggested she had not been told much about the middle Preston child. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, my father presiding at the head of the table despite his weakened condition. The familiar setting hit me with unexpected force, the crystal glasses catching the light, the heavy silver flatware, the perfect table linens. How many meals had I sat through here trying to be seen, to be heard? The conversation followed old patterns, James discussing hospital administration, Sophia sharing social gossip, my mother managing the flow of talk. I answered questions about Chicago, minimally recognizing that their interest was superficial at best. It wasn't until dessert was served that my father broached the business situation. "What have you found?" he asked directly, the businessman emerging from behind the paternal facade. I set down my fork deliberately. "The situation is critical, but not necessarily fatal. You've overextended, but there are assets that can be restructured or liquidated to satisfy immediate creditors." "Liquidated?" My mother's voice rose. "You don't mean selling family properties?" "The Vermont house at minimum," I confirmed. "Possibly the art collection, and the company will need to be downsized significantly." The shock around the table was palpable. These weren't just possessions to the Prestons, they were the physical manifestations of their identity and status. "There must be another way," my father insisted, some of his old authority returning. "The Preston name stands for excellence and stability." "Names don't pay creditors," I replied evenly. "Reality does." My directness silenced the table momentarily. In the past, no one would have spoken to William Preston this way, certainly not his forgotten middle child. "How long will you need to implement these changes?" my father finally asked, implicit in the question, the assumption that I would be staying to execute the plan. "As I mentioned yesterday, I'll provide a detailed assessment and recommendations before returning to Chicago in 2 weeks. You'll need to hire a financial restructuring specialist to implement the plan." "But you can't just leave," Sophia protested. "This is a family crisis." "I have my own life, my own business," I explained again. "I've taken time away to help assess the situation, but I won't abandon what I've built." "What you've built?" My mother's laugh held a note of disbelief. "Bianca, This is the Preston legacy we're talking about. Generations of work and reputation. Surely that takes precedence over photographs. And there it was, the familiar dismissal, the inability to see my work as valuable or legitimate despite its proven success. Some things truly hadn't changed. My photography business generates more annual profit than Preston Investments has seen in the last 3 years. I stated the facts backing my quiet confidence. I employ people who depend on me. I have clients and contracts I'm ethically bound to fulfill. My work matters. The silence that followed was deafening. My father studied me with new eyes, perhaps truly seeing me for the first time. James looked down at his plate, uncomfortable with the confrontation, but not disputing my assessment. Sophia and my mother exchanged glances as if trying to process this version of Bianca, who spoke with authority about business realities they had been sheltered from understanding. As I prepared to leave later that evening, my father called me into his study, a room that had once been forbidden territory unless specifically summoned. Now he sat behind the imposing desk, not as the titan of my childhood, but as an aging man facing the collapse of his life's work. "You've done well for yourself," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Better than I expected." "Yes," I agreed, simply not softening the reality or diminishing my accomplishments. He nodded slowly. "We need you to stay, Bianca. Not just for 2 weeks. The family needs you." The words I had longed to hear throughout my childhood now offered not from recognition of my worth as a daughter, but for my utility in crisis. The irony was almost too perfect. "I'll help you find the right people to implement the recovery plan," I said. "But my life is in Chicago now." As I turned to leave, I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. On a side table were boxes of childhood mementos clearly sorted for disposal. Among them, I recognized my old photography awards, school projects, and journals items I had been told were stored safely when I left for college. "What are these?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. My father looked uncomfortable. "We've been organizing, with the potential need to downsize the house." Investigating further, I found price tags on several items. With a cold shock, I realized they had been preparing to sell my childhood possessions without even informing me, while simultaneously expecting me to sacrifice my current life to save theirs. The discovery was the final piece I needed, clarifying the decision I had been wrestling with since arriving. They still didn't see me as a full person with rights and feelings, but as an accessory to the family narrative available to be used when needed, forgotten when not. I carefully closed the box of my journals. "I'll take these with me tonight. They're my personal property." My father looked ready to object, then thought better of it. "As you wish." Walking out of the Preston mansion that night, boxes of my past in my arms, I felt a clarity I had been seeking since James's desperate phone call. I now knew exactly what my role would be in this family crisis, and more importantly, what it would not be. The moment of reckoning was approaching, when I would finally stand fully in my power and redefine my relationship with the family that had always forgotten me until they needed something I could provide. The final confrontation came sooner than I had planned. After discovering my childhood mementos tagged for sale, I spent the night in my hotel room sorting through the recovered boxes. Each item chronicled a piece of the invisible girl I had been, the ribbons from art competitions my parents never attended. Journals filled with observations of a family that looked past me. Photographs I had taken where I had tried to capture belonging I couldn't find. By morning, my path forward was clear. I called a family meeting at the Preston offices rather than the house. Neutral territory would help me maintain the emotional boundaries I needed. They arrived looking expectant, clearly assuming I had developed a miraculous solution to their financial woes. My father, still moving gingerly after his surgery, took the head of the conference table by habit. My mother sat beside him, elegant as always, despite the strain of recent events. James and Sophia completed the tableau of Preston family unity, a unity that had never included me until crisis struck. Thank you all for coming. I began formally setting the tone immediately. I've completed my preliminary assessment of the business situation and have developed recommendations. I distributed folders containing detailed analyses and projections. The family looked surprised at the thoroughness of my work, perhaps still not fully grasping that I had become a capable businesswoman in my years away. The short version, I continued, is that Preston Investments requires immediate restructuring to survive. The Vermont property needs to be sold immediately. The art collection should be appraised for selective selling. The company workforce must be reduced by approximately 30%. My father's face tightened, but he remained silent, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Additionally, I said, meeting each person's eyes in turn, family salaries and draws need to be suspended for at least 6 months while the company rebuilds its capital base. Suspended? My mother looked aghast. But how will we live? On savings, I replied, like most people do during financial hardship. Sophia shook her head in disbelief. This can't be happening. We're Prestons. Being a Preston doesn't exempt you from financial reality, I said quietly. That's been part of the problem all along, the belief that the family name somehow makes you untouchable. My father cleared his throat. These measures sound extreme, but necessary. When can you begin implementing them? We'll need to move quickly. And there it was, the assumption that had brought me to this meeting, the presumption that the forgotten daughter would now set aside her own life to rescue theirs. I won't be implementing them, I stated clearly. As I've said from the beginning, I'm here to assess and advise, not to take over. I'll be returning to Chicago as planned. The shock around the table was immediate and visible. My mother looked at me as if I had suggested something obscene. Sophia's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of betrayal. James stared at his hands, perhaps having expected this outcome more than the others. That's unacceptable, my father said, his business voice returning despite his weakened state. The family needs you here. The family, I repeated the word heavy with meaning. Let's talk about that, shall we? I stood needing the physical advantage as I prepared to say what had gone unspoken for decades. I was the forgotten Preston, the middle child who never quite fit the family narrative. My birthdays were overlooked, my achievements ignored, my presence barely acknowledged unless I was needed for a family photograph or social appearance. That's not fair, my mother interjected. We always provided for you. Materially, yes, I acknowledged. I had food, shelter, education, but I was invisible in every way that mattered. When I chose a path that didn't align with the Preston image, I was dismissed entirely. You chose to leave, my father pointed out. Because staying meant continuing to disappear, I countered. I had to leave to become visible even to myself. The silence in the room felt charged with decades of unspoken truth. When I found my childhood possessions tagged for sale yesterday without even the courtesy of consulting me, it confirmed what I've always known. To this family, I've never been a full person with feelings and rights. I've been an accessory, useful when needed, forgotten when not. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was an oversight. No, I said firmly. It was a pattern. The same pattern that has defined my relationship with this family my entire life. I took a deep breath, centering myself in the strength I had built over years of creating my own path. I will help you, but on my terms. I'll develop a complete restructuring plan before returning to Chicago. I'll connect you with financial specialists I know who can implement it. I'll make myself available for phone consultations during the transition. That's not enough, Sophia protested. We need you here. What you need is my expertise, not my physical presence, I clarified. And you need to understand that I won't sacrifice the life and business I've built to rescue a family that never made space for me until they needed something I could provide. My mother's eyes filled with tears, a rare display of emotion from Eleanor Preston. "We're your family, Bianca." "Biology made us related," I agreed. "But family is something more than shared DNA. Family sees you values, you make space for your authentic self. I've found that in Chicago, with people who love me for exactly who I am, not for what I can do for them, or how I reflect on a family image." James finally looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "You're right," he said quietly, surprising everyone. "We failed you. I failed you as a brother. We never saw you clearly until we needed your help. That's on us, not you." His acknowledgement, unexpected and genuine, loosened something tight in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of something new, a recognition of truth that made moving forward possible. "I'll have the complete plan ready in 10 days, I said, returning to practical matters. "It will require difficult changes from all of you, not just financially, but in how you see yourselves and your place in the world." My father studied me from the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded. "We'll follow your recommendations." As the meeting concluded, I felt lighter than I had since arriving in Boston. Standing in my truth-setting, clear boundaries, refusing to be made invisible again. These were victories the frightened girl who had fled years ago could never have imagined. In the lobby, James caught up with me as I waited for a taxi back to my hotel. "I meant what I said up there," he told me. "We did fail you. I'm sorry it took a crisis for me to see it." I looked at my brother, really looked at him perhaps for the first time. Behind the golden child facade was a man struggling with expectations just as I had been, though from the opposite direction. "Maybe we can build something new," I suggested cautiously. "Not the old relationship, but something honest, something real." "I'd like that," he said, and I believed him. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane back to Chicago, my promise fulfilled. The restructuring plan was in place, specialists hired to implement it, and clear boundaries established for my ongoing involvement. The Preston family business would survive, though, in a more modest form than before. The family itself was beginning a difficult but necessary reckoning with reality. My return to Chicago felt like coming home in the deepest sense. David met me at the airport, his steady presence a reminder of the authentic life I had built. Grace organized a welcome-back dinner at the loft, filling the space with the chosen family that had seen and valued me when my birth family couldn't. In the months that followed, I channeled the experience into a new photography series titled Family Reconstructed, exploring the various forms of family and belonging beyond biological connection. The work resonated deeply with viewers, leading to my most successful gallery showing to date. My relationship with the Prestons evolved slowly, with careful boundaries maintained on both sides. Monthly calls with James became a regular occurrence, building a sibling relationship based on adult choice, rather than childhood circumstance. My parents made halting efforts to know me as I actually was, though old habits often reasserted themselves. The true healing came not from their changed behavior, but from my own internal shift. Being forgotten had shaped me in ways both painful and powerful. It had given me eyes to see what others overlooked, compassion for those who existed on the margins, and a determination to create spaces where everyone was truly seen. 6 months after the family crisis, I returned to Boston for the opening of my Family Reconstructed exhibition at a prestigious gallery. I had not told my family about the show, unsure if mixing my professional success with family dynamics was wise. Yet as I spoke with attendees during the opening reception, I looked up to see my father standing before the central piece of the collection, a striking image of empty chairs around a family table, with a single chair positioned slightly apart, illuminated differently than the others. "This is extraordinary work," he said quietly when I approached. "You truly see things the rest of us miss." The acknowledgement, simple but profound, was not what the child in me had desperately craved, but it was something real, something true offered from one artist to another. "Being forgotten taught me to truly see," I told him. "It was painful, but it gave me this vision, this voice. In a strange way, I'm grateful for it now." He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "We lost so much by not seeing you. That was our failure, not yours." As we stood together in that gallery surrounded by my work that spoke truth about family belonging and the courage to forge one's own path, I felt a completion of some long journey. The forgotten child had found her voice, and finally she was being heard. I had discovered that sometimes being overlooked allows you to develop a vision entirely your own. Sometimes being forgotten forces you to find and remember yourself. And sometimes the very thing that wounds you eventually becomes your greatest strength. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, or had to make difficult decisions about family expectations? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more authentic stories of finding your own path. Remember that your worth is not determined by others' ability to see it. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to be authentically yourself, even when others fail to see your true value.